This has been on my mind for some time now, but could it be?
Just as I was starting to get used to things at work, my boss called me over to talk to him.
Logan, what's your father's name?
Why would he ask me that? Thinking the situation was strange, I answered. I'll never be able to forget the face my boss made at that moment. Looking back at it, I really shouldn't have answered his question. My name is Logan. I'm a 30-year-old office worker. I work as a salesman for the local branch of a large conglomerate. I'm a bit of a pushover, so I was worried about getting into sales at first. If I try to imagine what a salesman looks like, I picture a strong-willed and muscular man. When I told my senior at work that, he laughed a lot. He said that as long as you are able to show your sincerity to your clients, it doesn't matter what kind of personality you have. I keep what in mind he told me and try my best at work every day. But there are some things that can't be resolved no matter how hard you try, and that includes my relationship with my boss, Mr. Garcia. Ever since I joined the company, Mr. Garcia has harassed me. I'm not the only employee who feels this way. Our boss is not flexible at all. He complains, criticizes, and nitpicks, all the while forcing his tasks onto us. After that conversation, his hate towards me only increased. The reason for his hate was completely unrelated to work. I discovered that Mr. Garcia and my dad were classmates in high school. I did think it was strange how he suddenly asked for my dad's name, but this was such a huge coincidence that I was shocked. My boss must have suspected who my dad is from the moment I joined his team. Now I regret telling him my dad's real name.
Your father always pushed me aside and ended up being the valedictorian while I was only number 2. And he dated Abigail, the most beautiful girl in school. I chased after her for so long.
Me suddenly appearing in Mr. Garcia's life must have felt like he has stepped on a landmine. As a side note, Abigail is my mother's name. I knew that my parents had been high school sweethearts, so there was no mistaking that my boss was talking about them. I swore to myself I wouldn't tell my boss about my mom, since that would only be adding fuel to the fire. I thought about calling up my dad and asking him about Mr. Garcia, but I decided that would only make my parents worried, so I held it in. I've been suffering since then. I became the biggest victim of his abuse in our department, hating your employees and letting your personal grudges affect your work. And anyway, my dad turned 57 this year, so what Mr. Garcia is resentful about is all stuff that happened nearly 40 years ago. I can understand him having mixed feelings about working with me, but that sort of obsessive resentment sends chills down my spine. The fact I'm able to last in my job is thanks to my colleagues. Though I was the one who suffered the most, many were upset by the way Mr. Garcia harassed us. My performance at work was good, and I have a strong CV. Being so spiteful to me just because of that one thing, it really said a lot about my boss's personality.
Logan, did Mr. Garcia say something to you again?
I must have had a weird look on my face. My colleague, Carlos, smiled over at me. Carlos is my senior at work, who's helped me out a lot since I first joined the company. I consider the two of us pretty close. He's great at his job and is our top salesman, but he's not full of himself at all. He was the one who told me,
as long as you are able to show your sincerity to your clients, it doesn't matter what kind of personality you have.
No, I just remembered something. I have remembered something our boss had said to me. I scratched my head and smiled wryly. Carlos knew why our boss was targeting me, so he often covered for me.
All right. The next time he causes you any trouble, don't hesitate to talk to me, or the others, okay?
Carlos grinned widely, showing off his white teeth, and walked away. I really respected Carlos and hoped to be like him in the future. I was really grateful to him and felt my mood improving. I pushed myself to continue working hard until it was time to go home. Our company holds a huge yearly all-hands meeting at our headquarters, during which they gather and look over all the data from the branch offices. It's an important opportunity to be noticed by the upper brass. People with the best results get bonuses, so it's a big event for all the employees. Of course, it's important for my office as well. My results were decent and improving, but I didn't expect to get a bonus. With that in mind, I wasn't all too stressed about the meeting. But then the day before the meeting,
I made a huge mistake.
Getting back after running some errands outside of the office, my boss called me over. Mr. Garcia showed me his laptop screen and I felt my face grow pale.
In the file I sent to HQ, I accidentally wrote that you made 0 sales this year. I really messed up this time.
He went out of his way to repeat what kind of mistake he had made. He grinned wildly as I began to panic. Isn't 0 going too far? Please edit in the correct sales and resend the file.
Huh? Why? Of course, I won't want to do that if you act like this. If they find out about the mistake I made, they'll think I'm sloppy at my job. It's alright to leave things like this, right? Your results weren't all that great anyways.
Well, you are sloppy at your job. I clenched my fists, desperately holding back my feelings. I knew that this definitely wasn't a mistake, that he did this on purpose. I knew what kind of person Mr. Garcia was from the way he treated me, but as a boss, messing with something this important just out of spite? I felt hatred for him from the bottom of my heart. Contempt bubbled up inside of me.
I already sent it, so it's too late. Since they think you have 0 sales, your chances at getting raises, bonuses, or promotions are probably very slim. But what can we do? This is what happens to the son of such a horrible man.
Mr. Garcia continued to laugh hatefully as he glanced over at me. What mistake? It was obvious he did all this because he hated my dad. Mr. Garcia had been talking in a loud voice, so all the other employees nearby overheard what was going on. Everyone was looking over at us with worried expressions on their faces. Sensing the atmosphere, Carlos stepped in.
What happened?
Our boss quickly went,
Ugh,
and had an annoyed look on his face. I pointed at our boss's laptop screen, and Carlos glared.
What? This has nothing to do with you. Does it, Carlos?
Seeing how flustered our boss was, I thought it was my chance. In order to strengthen the case against Mr. Garcia, I said, "To think he would do this?" Carlos tugged on my sleeve lightly to keep me from going further. I was conflicted about what to do next, but looking closely, I noticed that Carlos's mouth was trembling. I let out an over-exaggerated sigh. If I didn't sigh at that moment, I would have probably began to laugh, and I couldn't have our boss see that. Fine. Let's just leave things as is. I then turned my back to Mr. Garcia, who seemed both disappointed and relieved that I was backing down.
My bad. You'll get past this.
Our manager said those final, positive words to me as I walked away.
Carlos, did you notice? Of course I did.
Stepping out of Mr. Garcia's office, I could finally breathe again. I'm sure Mr. Garcia will quickly regret not editing and resending that file as I had suggested. He made a mistake that will prove lethal for him. The day of the big meeting, I was sitting at my work computer, drafting documents to send to some clients.
I'm sorry.
Our boss's voice suddenly rang across the room. Everyone went silent. Looking over at our boss, he was holding up a phone receiver. He was repeatedly apologizing to someone over the phone. Could it be a call from the meeting at HQ? One of my colleagues whispered in my ear. Probably. He'll be in trouble from now on. As I said that, I glanced over at Carlos, who made eye contact with me and nodded strongly. From the conversation we understood, the person on the phone was the head manager of our branch office. Our branch manager had gone to the head office today for the all-hands meeting. Apart from the data we sent, our branch manager and some other representatives went to take part in the meeting. During that important meeting, all the company leaders discovered the huge mistake in our branch's data. Mr. Garcia was finally getting what he deserved. Just when it was about time for us to head home for the day, our branch manager entered our office. As soon as the branch manager entered, he charged towards Mr. Garcia with a demonic look on his face. He was fuming. When he made eye contact with our boss, he began to scream.
What's this about? Why would our star salesman, Carlos, have 0 sales? Carlos's results are so good. The head office knows his name very well. There's no way he'd have 0 sales. I was put to shame because of you.
Mr. Garcia looked over at Carlos and I. We couldn't help but laugh. That's what had happened. I noticed that the previous day when our boss showed us the sales spreadsheet on his computer screen. Above the data, Carlos's name was written next to mine. Our boss laughed because he thought he had reported my sales as 0, but he had actually edited Carlos's column on the spreadsheet, not mine. It really was a mistake after all. Even a child could notice that if they looked closely. It seems Mr. Garcia saw the shocked look on my face and didn't bother to double-check the file. He usually forces the rest of us to do small tasks like editing, so he probably didn't even think about it. Of course, seeing that would shock me. Above all, I didn't want to cause Carlos any trouble. But Carlos stopped me from saying anything. After we had stepped away from Mr. Garcia's office yesterday, Carlos said,
This is a great chance. Let's show everyone what kind of a sloppy person he is.
As our branch manager has said earlier, Carlos is such a high-achieving employee that the main office knows him well. They're even considering transferring him over to the head office. So of course, it would become a big problem as soon as anyone notices what was written in the file. Above all, writing that someone has 0 sales is just too blatant of a mistake. The only person allowed to edit those documents is Mr. Garcia, so there is more than enough proof that he's the one who wrote that in. The branch manager was sent to scold Mr. Garcia directly. As our boss was standing, taking in all the scolding, he suddenly grabbed the chest of my shirt and dragged me over to our branch manager. "What are you doing?" Mr. Garcia yelled, "Be quiet," in response to my protests. He then turned to our branch manager and pleaded,
"It's not my fault. This guy knew all about my mistake and let me submit the file without telling me."
I shook myself from his grasp. "Please don't blame your mistakes on other people." I raised my voice at him. I then explained what had happened yesterday to our branch manager. Falsifying the data of one's employees is malicious and can't be accepted. And further, he made a mistake and wrote that under Carlos's name. I asked him to edit the data and resend the documents, but he refused because he didn't want to admit to his mistake. In response, my manager yelled at me to stop talking nonsense, Sparks were flying between us, and our voices got louder and louder.
Logan is telling the truth. He refused to edit and resend the document.
I heard it all. He even laughed, saying that it would affect Logan's future salary and bonuses. I think he's despicable. My colleagues began speaking up for me.
You guys?
Mr. Garcia glared at my colleagues.
What?
Our branch manager furrowed his eyebrows even more deeply than they had been so far. Carlos began to speak and explained how Mr. Garcia had singled me out and attacked me out of his personal vendetta.
I wonder if he did this because of that personal grudge as well.
At this point, our branch manager was shaking out of anger. Releasing all of his emotions at once, he let out a deep sigh and screamed.
Are you some sort of child?
Mr. Garcia continued to come up with excuses.
Don't be fooled. They're all targeting me. That's right. I'm sure Logan secretly snuck onto my computer and changed the data himself.
I grabbed something from my desk and handed it to our branch manager as I glared at our boss. I don't know your computer password, so of course, there's no way I could do that. The USB stick I just handed you has audio recordings from the times he harassed us. He treated other employees that way too, not just me. So please, give this a look. The USB stick was one you could easily attach to any laptop or smartphone. It was small, but could not hold a lot of data. After Carlos first witnessed the way our boss treated me, I came up with this plan. In order to collect evidence, while Mr. Garcia wasn't looking, I secretly spoke with the other employees he harassed. Everyone was happy to help collect recordings.
I'll definitely look through everything,
our branch manager said and nodded. Not expected me to be so prepared for this moment, Mr. Garcia's knees collapsed from beneath him. He looked around at everyone.
I didn't mean to do this. I just wanted to bully Logan a bit,
he said, his head drooping and voice sounding disappointed. Until now, Mr. Garcia probably only saw my resemblance to my father every time he looked at me. But what happened between them has nothing to do with me. He used his position as my boss to harass me, so he should be punished. You did all this just to see us suffer. How does it feel having it all come back to you? Our branch manager spoke up after me.
You're not cut out for a managerial role, huh? It seems I made a mistake giving you that position. Don't you think you should apologize to the employees you caused so much trouble for?
Mr. Garcia was pressured by our branch manager.
Damn it!
Mr. Garcia growled and punched the floor.
I'm sorry.
Trembling, he placed both his hands on the floor and apologized in a faint voice. I'm sure that from tomorrow on, all of us will be much happier at work. The next day, Mr. Garcia was dismissed from his job. The fact he falsified company data was a big factor, but since we all came out with proof of the way he harassed us, our branch manager decided regular punishment wasn't enough. Our branch manager came and apologized to us, saying that he should have been more careful when picking someone to lead us. Afterwards, the data was fixed and the documents were resent to the HQ. Carlos turned out to be the top salesman, and I was also highly complimented for my improvements this year. I'm still doing my best as a member of the sales team, and Carlos and I continue to have a good junior-senior relationship. If I have the chance to, I hope to raise in the ranks and become a manager of my own team in the future.